Greetings! Welcome to Homebrew Highlights, a little show where I talk about homemade content for Dungeons & Dragons. My name is Nathan. For the last 25 years online, I've used the name the Amethyst Dragon, and for the last 30 years or so, I've been a player and Dungeon Master. Over that time, I've made a lot of homebrew content, and especially after they switched to 5th edition, the pace of that has just increased. I actually make so much homebrew that I can't even use it in my 2 weekly campaigns. So I post it online for other people to use in their games. In this series, I'm going to be highlighting some of my content and then some work of somebody else. Instead of looking at the numbers and the balance aspect of it, I will be looking more at the thoughts and inspiration that went into creating the different things. Kind of a peek behind the curtains. And then maybe some thoughts of how to use these things in your own games. Um, just a glimpse, because I'm sure other people can come up with more useful or more varied uses for all sorts of homebrew. But this week, I'm going to be talking about daggers, and daggers. Little shout out to critters out there. Dagger is pretty much the only weapon I can think of offhand that every single class in the game is proficient with. It is a very versatile tool. You can do anything from slaying the big bad evil guy to cutting up your dinner. Daggers are one of the most iconic weapons in history because they're easier to make than swords, and you can throw them, and they're just really useful. So anything I make or anything I talk about today, I will throw a link down in the description so you can go directly to it for my stuff or for other people's content. Let's get right into it. First one I'm going to talk about I call Becket's Camp Knife. And this is a magic item designed for those parties that don't have the obligatory ritual casting of Tiny Hut. That seems to be in every game I play in. But this is for lower level characters that can't cast that yet, and it is just a really handy tool. When you're out in the wilderness or anywhere really, you take it, you stick it in the ground, and a minute later, poof, you have a camp set up for, I believe, up to 8 people, bedrolls, tents, food cooking already. Within like 20 or 30 minutes, the food is ready to eat. And then, being, a responsible camper, and you want to take out what you pack in, when you're done camping, you just pull it out of the ground, the entire camp disappears. Easy, super easy cleanup, and then it's ready to go for the next night. And that is Becket's Camp Knife. Just sounded like a handy thing to have. And then, if you aren't magically provided your food, you might be worried about parasites and disease and poison. Same with whatever water you find out in the wilderness, and that's where this next one comes in handy. Caretaker is a helpful dagger for when your mother isn't there to make sure your food is good. It casts Purify Food and Drink. So I could just imagine having your pot of whatever you happen to scrounge up, especially those outlanders that can just scrounge for everybody. Stir it around in the pot a little bit, purify the food, purify the drinks, and you're good to go. It can do it several times a day, so you can do it at every meal. And, well, that's Caretaker. Just a helpful little dagger. And as far as tools in the wilderness go, it's not always helpful if you're lost. So I came up with a dagger called Compass. And this is a simple one where you hold it in your hand, you give the name of a direction, and it rises up and turns and points in the direction that you said. Very reliable, very helpful. In my personal games, this dagger showed up in a wizard's tower. The group that found it probably could have used it several sessions earlier because they had been lost in the swamp of mists. But they finally found their way out and eventually came and got this dagger. And then when the ranger left the party because her player had to do school stuff, somebody used this so that the party wouldn't be as lost without their ranger. And this actually has an illustration that I personally did myself. I'm a very amateur artist. I just started in late spring of 2021. It's just pencil on paper. But since I don't use other people's artwork, I'm not exactly in a position to commission artists, and I wouldn't just take somebody's artwork and use it. So I decided to take up sketching and illustrating, and Compass was one of my first creations. I actually drew this while I was sitting out in the sun enjoying the nice weather. But that was a fun one. And that's Compass. This next one, we're kind of going alphabetical here. This next one is called Cruel End. And this was actually the first of a series of daggers. I created this one, and then I was going to post it online. I thought, well, just one dagger, that's not really a lot to start out. So I decided to sit down and come up with some ideas for other ones. And 30 minutes later, I had a list of 20 daggers. An hour later, I had them all written up and ready to go. Probably my most prolific brainstorming session and item creation session. But Cruel End is totally inspired by 5th edition's death saving throw rules. This is a nasty thing that I could see a evil character using, or a particularly vicious player character. When somebody goes down, they hit 0 hit points and they need to start making death saves. Whoever has this dagger can throw it out, and it will hover just above that unconscious person. And then once every turn, it will just take a stab. It only does 1 point of damage, but that is enough to force a failed death save. So if your buddy happens to go down, and normally you'd leave them for a few turns while you handle the bad guys, but you see this dagger hovering over them, you might want to go help them out really soon. So that is Cruel End, because that's exactly what it does. It just kind of rubs in, it adds injury to insult at that point. For something a little different, we have the Intimidating Blade. This one completely inspired by the 1980s movie Crocodile Dundee, when he's comparing, one knife to his knife. This one is very intimidating. There's actual magic built into it that when you use it to threaten somebody, you get a bonus to your chance to intimidate them as long as you use this magical dagger. The magic is built into it. Good for interrogations. Good for getting your way if you're not the persuasive type. It is just an intimidating dagger. And that's the Intimidating Blade. Next up, I have one called Sprite's Friend. Back in February of 2020, I decided to challenge myself and come up with daily homebrewed content, and I went with a theme. So I picked Fae-related content. So every day during the month, it was something new. And at the beginning of the month, it was Sprite's Friend. And this dagger is just inspired by sprites. It looks like it's got leaves. It's made of green metal. It smells like grass. But it is a magical weapon, and the wielder can turn invisible, just like a sprite. Not as often. You can only do it once per short or long rest, but it is really handy. And I just thought it'd be fun to have a dagger that didn't necessarily look or smell like metal. But that is Sprite's Friend. I'll definitely be talking. I'll have a video or two on some of the fake content that I made for that month. There was a lot of it, but this was one of them, and I wanted to share it because today's daggers. Going into other people's content, I decided to look for dagger-related things online, went onto Reddit, and the name of this next one caught my attention. It is the Dagger of Unyielding Loyalty, by a creator called Goldilust. And Goldilust actually digitally painted the artwork for this one, which you can see right here. This is a cool little magic dagger that is actually quite powerful. It's a +2 weapon. And when you slay a humanoid creature, you can choose to animate them as an undead minion that is possibly very loyal to you. And, well, probably. You can make more powerful undead minions, but the chance for you to be able to control them and keep them loyal to you goes down the more powerful they are, because they have to make a charisma save, and that save is easier and easier for the more powerful types of undead. You could amass an army of weak undead with this if you just went around and, like, slaughtered a whole village. So it's probably more for like your NPC villains, and then definitely a moral dilemma for player characters, unless you have an evil party. But Goldilust built a limitation into this. If they're not slain, the undead only last for 24 hours before they die permanently. For reals. So the undead can't go marching on forever like they could with an animate dead spell if they're uncontrolled. So that is the Dagger of Unyielding. Actually, before I finish with this one, there's some flavor text built into this one. It's not mechanical, but it's cool. Creatures that were slain by this dagger, their souls constantly cry out, and normally it's not heard, but if you wield this dagger, you can hear those screams and those cries constantly in your head, and it never goes away. This could drive somebody to madness if they're not already insane. And Goldilust describes it as eventually they just become numb because of the constant mental torment. So I could see them just not paying attention to the pain that others are in, being emotionally distant because you can't handle what's in your head. You're just not going to deal with what's around you. So that's a fun little thing for the Dagger of Unyielding Loyalty. Thank you for that, Goldilust. I'm probably going to put it in the hands of an evil necromancer or warlord or something in my own game. That's a higher level thing. My parties aren't quite that high level yet, but eventually. And now for something that isn't actually it could be a dagger. Could be dagger related. So we'll do a subclass. I made up a subclass called the Witchblade, and for my games, this is a replacement for the Hexblade Warlock subclass. My own game doesn't have the Shadowfell, it doesn't have the Raven Queen or Black Razor or any of that lore behind it, and I wanted something as an option that could do some of the same things, but wasn't all gloomy and edginess. So for mine, this Warlock's power comes from a sentient weapon, just like the Hexblade, but this one seeks out lost lore and magical secrets, and it likes to share that knowledge with its wielder, with its warlock. Still a combat-centric subclass. They still get armor proficiency, they get useful skills, they get proficiency in whatever type of weapon that this is. This weapon doesn't change, so it could be a dagger, it could be an axe, it could be a sword, but it's going to be the same type of weapon the whole time. It's not going to change. In one of my own campaigns, I had a player using this, and his Witchblade is a glaive named Signseeker, but it could definitely be a dagger. And there's a bit of magic involved. They get added damage when they activate their weapon. They can break free of enchantments and things that catch them. So if they fail their initial save, every turn after that, they get advantage on their saves to break free. They get an adaptive damage resistance at 10th level, where they have resistance to slashing damage. But if during their turn during the round they took a whole bunch of fire damage, they gain fire resistance instead. If the turn after that they take a whole bunch of necrotic damage, that switches over to necrotic resistance. So it can change during the course of a fight, but it basically adapts to whatever they took the most damage of the previous turn, which is fun. And then because the name of this was inspired by the TV show of the Witchblade, which is based on a comic series of the same title, and there was a little bit of time manipulation involved in that. I did that for their capstone, where the Witchblade here, patron, lets the Warlock reach back a little bit into their own past and pull some of their own power forward. And it lets them restore their health if they've been wounded very recently, and they might even be able to restore a spell slot if they have expended one. They can only do that like once per short or long rest. I'll have to look again. But that is their capstone ability at 14th level. So that is the Witchblade. I thought it was a cool name, so I went with it. Kind of related to Hexblade, still in blade involved in the name, but I thought it was fun. And yeah, not necessarily a dagger, but it definitely could be. So that's it for the content for this week. We'll wrap it up here. If you like this sort of video, give me a like down below. Maybe subscribe to my channel. If you want to be notified when I post a new video, which should be about every week, hit the little notification bell. If you want access to all of my content, a lot of the stuff I featured today is free. Not all of it is. I have well over 800 things that I've made, and it's on a big list. A lot of the content is free. If it isn't, it is for patrons. Very affordable. I don't charge a lot for that. Patrons get access to all of my content. But even if you're not a patron, thank you for stopping by. Thank you for listening and watching and taking an interest in homemade content that isn't necessarily published by Wizards of the Coast to expand your own game. And again, my name is Nathan. This has been Homebrew Highlights, and I look forward to chatting with you again. Take care. I'm going to go make something else.